Hey, how y'all doing? Thank you for choosing the Magnificent Mongo Slave for all of your wrestling content and information. Like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into the video. Hey, how y'all doing? So ESPN did a profile on Orange Cassidy. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's entirely too long. So I'm going to read certain parts of it and give my thoughts. You ready? Because it's really, it's we're in bad shape, dog. Okay, so I'm skipping like 2 or 3 paragraphs. Orange Cassidy is nothing like most wrestlers. He even has that opening and that momentum, but instead of going on the attack, he puts his hands in the air, then puts them down into his pockets. He lethargically taps Jericho's legs with his feet. Calling these strikes kicks would be an equivalent of calling a paper cut a light threatening gash. Jericho stands there more annoyed than hurt. Orange Cassidy backpedals to deliver one final blow, except this time, instead of another tap to the chin, it's a thundering super kick to Jericho's chin. This is Orange Cassidy. This is his essence. A wrestler who lulls detractors into a false sense of security or disdain with comedy and apathy. When their guard is fully down, he kicks them in the face. This is the wrestling's male breakout star of 2020. Let's stop right here. Look, as much as wrestling is performance and not sport, I don't understand the purpose of being in the ring with somebody who does that. It's like, okay, we know kung fu movies aren't real, but do you really think let's talk about this? No, let's continue with the kung fu movies because we know kung fu movies aren't real. But does kung fu movies have to look incredibly fake? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we know, like, for me it's always been the concept of these hipster doofuses that like ironic wrestling, like it's wrestling but it's not really wrestling. The guys who pushed Joey Ryan's dick flip stuff and all this type of stuff. Like, these are the guys who really like Orange Cassidy because they're like, oh, look how funny he is. He's mocking wrestling. It's like, I understand the psychological aspect of the character. I understand the psychology of the character. You don't have to explain that to me. I get that he's trying to lull his opponent into a false sense of security. But at the same time, if your opponent is not taking it seriously and it comes across as look, the only good thing about the whole soft kicks and stuff like that is people don't sell them, right? Is that, the point is to not sell them and for you to attack so he can dodge and evade and stuff like that. I get that. Again, I understand the psychology of the character. I understand the psychology of the character's matches. I just don't understand why the character exists. Okay, so now before we even get to that, once we understand that point, we say this is the male breakout star of 2020. Let's see if they back this up. They say it goes into Orange Cassidy's early career about how he created the freshly squeezed gimmick in 2010. So Orange Cassidy says, I guess it was like 2005, 2006 when I really tried to start to wrestle. And it didn't matter. Like, I was wrestling as another guy that sucked with long hair, said Cassidy to ESPN. It was one of those things where you like wrestling, so you build a ring in your backyard and you start to wrestle. And then, no one likes you because you're a skinny white kid who doesn't do anything great. Okay. So then Cassidy turned to his freshly squeezed persona as an attempt to stand out. In an independent scene in which performers played a never-ending game of can you top this with their flips and athleticism, Cassidy flipped the blueprint on its head. Instead of trying to come up with the most insane and innovative move on each show, Cassidy rolled the dice on an alternative approach, doing as little as humanly possible. If I have to wrestle, I'll wrestle. It's not my fault that I'm good at wrestling, Cassidy said, explaining his character's motivations. It's like one of those things where if you have a job and you're good at it, do you really wanna? So do you really want to do your job? Okay. The gamble didn't pay off immediately. The gimmick, much like its approach to life, took its time to find success. This has legit been happening for 10 years now, Cassidy's trio's partner Chuck Taylor said, and my favorite part of it has been going to shows with him this long and watching crowds hate him and be confused by him, and not in a good way. So let's go back to the character's motivations. It's like one of those things where you have a job, you're good at, but do you really wanna? It's like, okay, I get I understand the character in the psychology of the character, but here's the thing: you're good at your job, and looking at Orange Cassidy's record, he never really wins. So shouldn't, if you're going to be a sloth-like character, shouldn't you be like some undefeated jackass or something like that? That you win squash matches in 2 minutes, and so you don't really take anybody seriously. And if you want to go pure performance, pure character, Mongo, stop complaining about the hands in the pockets and all that type of shit. Okay, let's not do that. It doesn't make any sense from a character perspective, because it's unearned laziness. Okay, it's one thing to be so good at something that you don't take anything seriously, and you just rather go to the beach and put your and relax and stuff like that. That's one thing. But when your record is 6-6 or 6-7, and you're on the losing end of most of your matches, and you're in the ring with former world champions who you've never competed with in the first place, it doesn't make any sense to be the lazy guy, because it's unearned. Why would you? Okay, let's continue. Let's see. A lot of this stuff is nonsense about him coming to PWG. Okay, or PWG and his rise into AEW. Okay, so let's continue. Quote unquote, the Young Bucks were the people that were like, we need to get Orange here, Orange Cassidy said, because my character is a giant middle finger to professional wrestling. So they were like, of course, let him in. A giant middle finger to professional wrestling. There it is. I mean, it's clear as fucking crystal. If you want to see, if you want to know what these people are thinking, again, they're hipsters that don't really like wrestling. Now, somebody said something about it wasn't even on the subject of Orange Cassidy, but it was about sort of Naomi. When Booker, I just uploaded this video just a few hours ago about Booker T saying that Naomi needs to earn it on merit. And then people started saying, well, how can you earn anything in the wrestling business when everything is fake and people just give people things? Then how can you truly earn it? And then somebody else responded and they said, of course you don't understand earning it, because a lot of these people are not wrestling fans. They're former dancers and models and losers who like to make fun of wrestling and just get into it for the money and think that, we can just give people titles and give people opportunities even when they don't earn it. And somehow it's equivalent to somebody who worked, for decades or whatever. That's what this is here, right? This is somebody who, again, by his own admission, couldn't do the actual wrestling part of wrestling well. So he decided to lean more into the heavily into the character part of wrestling, which is a good thing. Wrestling is about characters. It is what it is in that front. But when you're making a mockery of the business because you couldn't make it as a serious performer, so now you're going to make it as a mockery, then it says a lot about how much you really cared about the business in the first place. You probably should have just went home. You probably should have just quit. But what can you do? He's actually going to be he's going to be featured, because this is what Tony Khan had to say. He clearly had a following, but he wasn't somebody when we started that I was particularly aware of or had any real plans for. After Double or Nothing, I spent time with Orange Cassidy and got to know him a little better, and also talked to him about ideas, and that opened up a lot of doors for both of us. I had no idea what an intelligent person Orange Cassidy is, and he is very smart, and really, I had no idea how well thought out all this was. He's multi-talented. He's a team player. He's tried to make other people look good as much as possible. And the most important thing above all else is his work is phenomenal. He is a great wrestler. AEW bills itself as sports-based. It keeps track of wins, loss records, and prides itself on hard-hitting, fast-paced action. Cassidy immediately stood out as he sauntered in to throw slow-motion kicks using minimal effort wherever he went. And this is, the last part as far as AEW builds itself as sports-based, that's ESPN. But the part before that was his boss, Tony Khan, basically saying like, oh, he's a great wrestler. He's he's really thinking about this. Again, it's Tony Khan is a mark. You know, again, what I'm saying is it's unearned laziness. I'm talking strictly from a character perspective. Nobody knows who the fuck Orange Cassidy is. Why is he so arrogant about wrestling? And you say, "Oh, he's so good at it. He's really good." He's a typical white luchador. He does white lucha stuff. That's really all he does. You know, like he does high flying stuff. That's it. That's the extent of the character. Is that he does high flying offense, which which even by his own admission, again, he admitted this earlier in the article, everybody else does it. So that's the difference between him and the other characters, is that he supposedly, right? He supposedly gave up on trying because he wanted to do something different, and he wanted to be a big middle finger to pro wrestling. And his boss was like, "Yeah, I can see that. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's what I'm paying billions of dollars for." Weird. Really, really, really weird. Okay, so fans started to show up to events dressed as Orange Cassidy, children and adults alike. And as AEW crushed initial performance expectations with their audience as an upstart wrestling promotion, the first person to cross over into the mainstream to get their own TNT commercial wasn't any of the former WWE stars or the core AEW performers like Cody, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, or Hangman Page. It was Orange Cassidy. Tony Khan again. He's become organically a big merchandise mover, and he's been in some very high-rated television segments. It's not inaccurate at all to say that TNT loves him. Orange Cassidy is becoming, by every definition, crowd reception, entertainment value, and most importantly, converting fans into paying customers, a pro wrestling megastar. Oh, that's I don't know what that. Wow. And he's doing it the old school way, by getting the absolute most out of the absolute least. And there's this idea that wrestlers in the past, you know, because wrestlers, and some of the ones that are still around, you know, before, and then some of these guys before they passed, like Harley Race, they would say, "You're doing too much, kid. You know, you're taking too many chances. You're beating your body up. You're doing, you know." So this was something that, of course, if you talk to Meltzer, he'll say, "Oh, well, they were saying that in the 80s about Flair and Steamboat." It's like, yeah, that's true. They probably were. And I saw Luthez, who has, you know, again, the Thespian concept of pro wrestling is if you don't have an amateur background, you have no business calling yourself a world champion in wrestling, and you probably shouldn't even be in the business. That's Luthez's position right there. So a lot of people who are in the business right now wouldn't be there if Luthez had his druthers. But so I'm not that far into the whole Thespian concept of wrestling. But the idea that, you know, we're doing the absolute least, it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. Okay? That means you're not taking unnecessary chances as far as doing 450 splashes in the first match, or doing hella cross dives off the top rope onto the floor and hurting yourself, or trying to kill yourself in order to get cheap pops from the crowd. And then it also, again, psychology, it affects the other matches around yours. In other words, if you steal the show from the main event, people will stop paying to see the main events. And once people stop paying to see the main events, then everybody loses money. You know, and then of course you do things, and then you run the risk of getting, this is the Vince McMahon concept, is you work a style that you can work multiple times a year, because wrestlers, and especially in the WWE, work 250, 300 days a year or some crazy shit like that. Why work a style where you can get injured? So again, Orange Cassidy is not working a style where he can get injured, but he's also, you know, but at the same time, he's not doing anything. Like, we're paying to see him mock wrestling. That's what it is. And there's no other way to view it. What he does is mock wrestling. Okay? That's his character. And people think that he's a megastar because of this. He's going to become a wrestling megastar because, you know, but they again, they're not looking at the audience. The audience for AEW is the internet geeks. You know, they're the ones who goes to the shows. They're the ones who make sure they watch it on TNT so they could brag about the TV ratings and all that crap. That's their audience, okay? And a lot of their shows have not been well attended. Back when there were crowds, you could often see AEW shows that were sparsely attended. I failed to recognize the concept of a megastar performing in half-empty buildings. Now, when Orange Cassidy had his first match, which they discussed here a little bit later, that was in I think a significantly fuller building, because I think that was Jon Moxley's first event too, and he was in the main event against Kenny Omega. So, I mean, he had a decent crowd for that match, and he did his gimmick. You know, it's hard to say that he actually worked because he just does his gimmick, which is, you know, light kicks, like strikes, and then he ducks a clothesline or rolls out of the way, and, you know, ultimately he may do a top rope thing or whatever. But it's not like Orange Cassidy, just off the strength of his own name, is moving a lot of digits. In fact, Orange Cassidy versus Chris Jericho did get outdrawn, I think, by Keith Lee and Adam Cole. So it's not, I don't know. And that was Chris Jericho was in that match. And Chris Jericho is a over 25 years in the business, former WWE champion, main event in WrestleMania. You know, how do you argue that? How do you argue that AEW, which had 1 million people watching the show when it started, is at 600, 700,000, within that range now? But they have a megastar on their hands as far as Orange Cassidy is concerned. If you had a megastar that TNT loves so much, why isn't he wrestling on every show? Why is Cody wrestling on every show? Why is Kenny Omega wrestling on every show? Why is the Lucha Brothers on every other show? Everybody wrestles more often than Orange Cassidy, and yet Orange Cassidy is the guy that TNT loves? Okay. If you say so, boss. The boss kind. So JR, Jim Ross, wants to talk about this. He says, I have to admit, when I first saw Orange Cassidy, my old school self said, well, that kid's never going to get over. That's too bad. He seems like a nice young man, Ross said. I was wrong on Orange Cassidy. He's a fine guy. He's a pro. He's a good pro. And he's got a different act. Ross was far from Cassidy's only doubter when he debuted in AEW. There are still old school wrestling personalities who call Cassidy a cosplay wrestler, a slang term for someone who doesn't take wrestling serious enough, or actually it's just somebody who is pretending to be a wrestler when they're really not. Does it really apply to Orange Cassidy? I think that his gimmick is so dimensional that he is a wrestler pretending to be a guy who can't wrestle, or he's a wrestler pretending that he's too good to wrestle and therefore he doesn't wrestle. But when he does wrestle, he wrestles really well. So it's like this 4D chess, big-brained idea of wrestling. And it's like, okay, if you say so, boss. Chuck Taylor says, I think that the people that are going to be still mad are the ones who still want to work with him. And I guess further out, us? Huh? Let me read that again. Chuck Taylor says, I think the people that are still mad are the ones that still want to work with him. And I guess further on out, us? Us? No. Nobody wants to work with Chuck Taylor. The invisible hand grenade guy? Fuck you. The guy who looks like the big dog from the Looney Tunes. I forget oh god, what the fuck is that dog's name? If I explain the dog to you, you'll know what I mean. He looks like the big dog from Looney Tunes that had the red hair that cover his eyes. I'm gonna find a picture of him and I'm posting it. I will be doing it. And he reminds me a lot of that dog. But anyway, Chuck Taylor says, if you're not willing to evolve, like, get out of the way. Okay, so the evolution of wrestling is to mock wrestling, is Chuck Taylor's position. Chuck Taylor, the invisible hand grenade guy. For people who don't know about the invisible hand grenade, Chuck Taylor in a match on the Independents, of course, because only Tony Khan is willing to sink money into a guy like this, pretended to be throwing a hand grenade in a wrestling match. And then it exploded and everybody fell down. So imagine somebody chucking a grenade, not a fake grenade, not a toy grenade. There was nothing in his hand, and he tossed it, and then everybody pretended that it exploded, and everybody fell down. That's the kind of people that we're talking about here. Talking about that's the evolution of the business. Those are the kinds of people that we're talking about here. You know, that's not even theater. I don't know what the fuck that is. Like, wrestling has gone far from its sports base. Like, Tony Khan promised a sports based presentation. What he's given us is what some people have referred to as community theater. And I don't even know if you would call it community theater. I think that it's like sometimes watching AEW is like watching that really really bad play. What was it? Nightman. From It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's kind of how I feel sometimes, where you have to pay the troll toll to get in. You know, like it's that bad as far as the acting is concerned. Because none of these guys are trained actors, and WWE actually gives people some acting training because they require you to act. But a lot of these guys have no acting training, so it's not even community theater. At least you have to have at least some type of acting background to be in any kind of theater. This is like straight up backyard home movies at this point. Like two guys, like it's like no, I'm not going to go where I was going to go with it. But yeah, it's backyard home movies at this point. It's backyard home movies with a big budget. That's essentially what it is. Let's go back to the article. That criticism will always be there for a character like Cassidy's, but Khan is fully supportive of the dynamic he brings to the ring. He earned a position, Khan said. He started out in small roles, and he would knock it out of the park over and over and over again, and constantly over-index and outperform the amount of time or the position on the card we gave him. Khan purposely held off letting Orange Cassidy have his first singles match, knowing he had an ace in the hole when the time was right. While fans clamored to see Cassidy in the ring, Khan made them wait all the way up until AEW's February 29th Revolution pay-per-view. In the lead-in to the match, best friends warned Pac that he might think of Cassidy as a joke. The joke was actually on Pac, because Orange Cassidy was going to try. And then, of course, this came with the "he's going to try" chant, because wrestling fans would chant anything because a lot of them are drones. And that's just kind of how it is. And you could tell a lot of wrestling fans are drones by the conception of who follows certain wrestling personalities, especially people online. Like, there's a lot of high viewer count accounts as far as wrestling YouTubers and wrestling podcasters that really just parrot. I don't know. My brain is fucking up. But they really just parrot what Alvarez says. You know, there's some of them that are specific, that really nothing they say is any different than what you would hear from Brian Alvarez or Meltzer. You know, they say the same things. Their formulation is the same. Their likes and dislikes are the same. Everything is the same. And very, very rarely you stumble across a unique voice as far as wrestling commentary is concerned. But the "he's going to try" chant is full again for drones, because you should always try, especially if you're going to be in a look. The Orange Cassidy and Pac feud was not a blood feud or anything like that, but the Orange Cassidy Chris Jericho feud was. If your character only has one dynamic, which is lazy at all times, then I don't understand how it's supposed to be a brilliant gimmick. Because it's like, oh, he's so cool, nothing bothers him. Like, yeah, getting your eardrum busted didn't bother you at all. Is that good psychology? That you got your eardrum busted and then you didn't react in any major way? You got beat with a bag of oranges, which is come on, let's be real, that's stupid, okay? And the whole orange juice stuff is stupid. But whatever. Let's continue. Orange Cassidy said, "To see people care about what I'm doing is very surreal, because it's like it only worked in front of 50 people. To hear giant crowds reacting to it is like I can't explain it." Oh, okay. And this is getting really strange, man. While Cassidy is in the ring, felt a culmination for best friends. It represented a coronation for the wrestling world. Tony Khan continues. He was probably already a star in many ways, but nobody knew in the big picture of AEW what an important person Orange Cassidy was for us. I definitely think that match at Revolution was very important, and that was something we were building up to for a really long time. Okay. You talk about that he was Orange Cassidy was booked to be on a late night TV show, but the virus got it canceled, and then they started talking about Orange Cassidy being hurt by no live audience because his gimmick doesn't really work without a live audience, which is very strange, right? As far as a wrestler who wrestled in small buildings for most of his life, how is it that your gimmick doesn't work in front of no crowds? Like, whatever, dog. It says, now Orange Cassidy is established a main event player in AEW. He won over the diehard fans by doing nothing. He won over the skeptics by trying. And now he's won over the front office by going above and beyond outside of the ring in unprecedented times. Okay. And but let's back up, because I didn't read this part because I really didn't see it. I skipped it. But now, as I sit here thinking of like, what else could I possibly talk about that won't give me an aneurysm? Tony Khan said this: it's challenging for him in so many ways without a live audience because his act interacts so well with live crowds. And I think that's where his wrestling skills have come to the forefront. Really? How many matches have Orange Cassidy had in front of no crowd? I don't know. It's been so great that he can go bell to bell and have a 20-minute classic with Jericho where it's not comedy, it's just great wrestling, because the pandemic is really forcing people to show their skills. He said he could have a 20-minute classic with Jericho. Now, I gave the match a pretty decent review. I don't think that the match was absolute trash. But again, the psychology of the match does not make any sense. Am I supposed to believe that Orange Cassidy, a bum who was on the Independents 2 years prior, is in the same league with former main event of WrestleMania Chris Jericho, and there's no reason to think that? Orange Cassidy's not a former world champion anywhere. He's never done anything anywhere. It's not like you could say, well, Orange Cassidy was the top guy in Impact. Orange Cassidy was the top guy in New Japan. Orange Cassidy was the top guy in Ring of Honor. No. He was maybe the top guy in a pro wrestling company that does not have TV. So where does he earn the concept of he's not going to even try against Chris Jericho? Whatever, dog. Whatever. Mock wrestling is what wrestling is now. You know, it's not even community theater, because you have to actually have some talent to even be in a community theater. I'm frustrated. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.